For me, I'm not really sure when things became complicated, but I know that somehow they did. For the most part, I always thought of myself as a pretty normal kid. I was the middle of 3 boys, my parents were high school sweethearts, and my hero was my dad. I always wanted to be just like him. Like I said, I'm not sure when things started to change, but in grade school I was getting labeled as shy. The teacher said that I was a good kid, but I just didn't talk or participate much in class. While I admit I struggled a little bit in school, I did all right in sports, and luckily I found out early on that I had a voice through art and music. In high school, my so-called shyness, combined with typical teen insecurity, made it even more difficult for me to fit in. By the time I went to college, simple things like answering a question in class would cause my neck and face to break out in giant red blotches. My cheeks would be on fire, and my heart would pound so intensely in my chest that all I could think about was getting out. I remember hating myself for not being like everyone else. I always kept my feelings to myself, and I did whatever I could to keep people from knowing how I really felt and how much I was hurting. I'm not saying that I didn't have fun in college. I did. I had a lot of fun. But I knew inside things were getting worse for me, not better. Somehow, between the anxiety and extreme blushing, I was lucky enough to meet the woman of my dreams. Soon after college, I stumbled into a real job in Kansas City, and as luck would have it, Pamela was still a part of my life. I desperately wanted to ask her to marry me, but I knew that I'd have to stand up in front of everyone and be put on display. There was no way around this one. I just have to suck it up.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Philip Archer Lawrence III. Did you get it? All right!
In 1993, we moved to Minnesota and started our own video production business. I was becoming a master at compensating for my anxiety and the physical effects that came with it. In 1996, our daughter Madeline was born. The reality of having a child and the responsibilities that come with it rocked me to the core. I knew I'd no longer be able to hide. I knew that I was going to have to face my demons. But how? That same year, I first saw the ads for the antidepressant Paxil. They had these great scenes that depicted what it felt like to have social anxiety disorder. When I saw these ads, all I could think of was, that's me, that's how I feel. I knew it. I'm not wired like everyone else. I'm not normal. I have a chemical imbalance. I wanted Paxil. I needed Paxil. I went to see the doctor, and within 10 minutes, I was leaving his office with a prescription for 20 milligrams of Paxil. God bless this food which now we take and do us good for Jesus' sake. Amen. Love, 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 love. Now, I'm 42 years old. I have a beautiful wife, 3 wonderful healthy kids, a decent house, and a successful business. I still take 20 milligrams of Paxil every day. I don't have panic attacks anymore. I don't feel the need to rush out of a room, and I don't feel anxious. Come to think of it, I don't feel much of anything. While Paxil may have successfully blunted my emotions enough to mask the effects of my anxiety, I'm not sure if it ever really cured me of anything. And somewhere along the way, it took away my ability to feel. I was never overly sad or overly happy. I was just flat. After 10 years on this antidepressant, I literally have no idea who I am. I want to find out. I want to stop taking Paxil. With the help of my family and friends, and by utilizing the resources of my video production business, I plan on documenting my journey to stop taking Paxil.
You just want me to shoot with this little camera whenever, right? Just you? Like what you're doing and stuff?
Yeah. I'm just going to leave it loaded with a tape, and then you can just pick it up and shoot whenever you want.
Okay.
But what I want to do with this one is I'm going to find out, I'm going to see if I can put it up around in here, you know.
You're going to do what?
I'm going to stick my expensive camera up here.
Why?
Because I want to get shots of just our everyday life, you know.
Oh.
What I know. I don't get mad. I don't feel happy. I just am. My compassion and empathy for others has faded. I have no sexual desires. I'm actually at the point where I find it hard to imagine why anyone would have sex. I drink too much. I'm concerned that Paxil has affected the way I raise my children. I'm scared to stop taking the medication.
Good. Now take some big deep breaths in and out. I have used very little paroxetine for a number of reasons over the years. One of which is this problem in going off the medication. I can tell you that I've had two patients I can think of who have had significant difficulties and side effects as they wean off the medication.
Yeah.
One of whom did it cold turkey and suffered for 2 weeks of flu-like symptoms,
Right.
And then was over. The other gentleman slowly weaned it and kept having his symptoms recur, very uncomfortable with it. We were trying to switch to a different medicine to see if it would control his symptoms better. He just couldn't get down enough and would get anxious and uncomfortable enough that he just said, you know what, I'm fine on the medication.
Really?
Just continue taking it. Okay. And so your dose is 20 milligrams. And what I would suggest is that it would be most reasonable for you to cut to 10 milligrams for probably a good 2 weeks, and let me know during that time kind of how you're feeling.
Okay.
Realizing that you can have the fatigue, some nausea, some dizziness, some changes in emotions, but maybe nothing at all.
Right.
Okay. And then after 2 weeks, kind of check in with me.
Okay.
See how your symptoms are going, how you're feeling, and then decide if we cut down to 5 milligrams, or if we decide that we're just going to kind of cut you off at that point, or continue the 10 milligrams for another 2 weeks and then stop.
Okay.
Okay.
I was excited to get started, but the more I learned about what could happen, the more apprehensive I became about cutting my first dose.
I think sometimes the internet is dangerous.
Well, I agree with that.
Because you're finding lots of extremes.
You mean if you want to find something about
If you want to find the worst possible thing about getting off of Paxil, you're going to find it on the internet, and then you're going to freak yourself out about getting off of it, and then you're going to think, okay, do I have this symptom? Do I have this symptom? Do I have this symptom? And I think a lot of these people go cold turkey.
Yes, a lot did.
And so you're going to see extremely dramatic results when you don't taper off of a drug like you should. I just want you to be positive and not read about all these freakouts and think that you're going to be one of them.
From what I've heard, everything we've shot so far, the sound is fine. I don't know if we're just lucky or we don't have an audio person. So yeah.
So how are you feeling this morning?
You know what? It's funny that you're asking me that right now, because I was just going to say my hands are like kind of clammy. And honestly, I don't know if it's because I'm. I think it's just because it's a moment. It's like anything else. It's like saying, no matter what you've done up until now, it's all going to change right now, because it's like, 10 years we're going to start this, and then I could be fine, which would be great, and it could be, have a little rough time for a month or so, or 2 months or whatever. But anyway, either way, it's got me a little nervous, but I'm ready. So here's my supply. And I've got my trusty pill splitter, because Dr. Bergeson suggested I go from my 20 milligrams down to 10. All right. Well, God, can you imagine being like 90 years old trying to work this? Aren't like old people the people that are always cutting their pills? All right. So here we go. First pill. Hey. Now, This is kind of like the old, what do you call it when you get the wishbone? I think I'm going to go with the bigger dose. I'm going to go with this bigger dose to start with right there. So here we go. There it is. Half of a gem right there. We'll see what happens. Dun, 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 dun. Right. We're off and running. The United States is one of only 2 countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer marketing of prescription medications. And the ads are everywhere, on TV, in magazines, on the internet, and even on race cars. No single industry spends more money on advertising than the pharmaceutical industry. They actually spend 1/3 of their revenues on marketing, more than 2.5 times what they spend on research and development of new drugs. The FDA regulates the industry, and it's their job to make sure prescription drug advertisements do not contain false or misleading information or omit material facts. All right, bud. Ready?
Woo. Who's in front? Oh, yeah, he's the
All right. Good. Well, here I am. This is the 3rd day. I slept really good last night. I mean, I was a little freaked out going into it, but once I went to bed, I was gone, man. No dreams, no nothing. Woke up this morning and got the kids to school, and I definitely noticed like a dizziness. I mean, not really like fully dizzy, but if I turned my head one way or the other, like too fast, it felt like my brain stayed here and then caught up. I don't know if the effects are really hitting me that fast, or if it's just, you know, just another day, but it feels weird. I don't know what it is, but it feels weird. So I'm going to pop this one in half to keep going on my 10 milligrams. Here we go. Another 10 milligrams, day 3. Let's see what happens. I love doing that. I've taken a medicine for a long, long time, like ever since you were born. It's a medicine for, like, if you get like super nervous or something.
Yeah.
And I used to get like really nervous, like for like when I go like to go out for business meetings.
Yeah.
And so this is a medicine that would help you not be so nervous. Well, I took it for a long, long time, and now it kind of makes me not feel very good, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop taking it, and I'm making a movie about me stop taking it. What I'm going to do today is I am going to secure as many interviews as I possibly can for people who will speak positively about antidepressants and about the diagnosis of mental illness. So far, I've got tons of interviews from authors, doctors, consumer advocates who are all, you know, pretty riled up and talk freely about the dangers and the risk. But I haven't gotten one person to talk to me yet about the benefits, at least not from the APA or the FDA or the National Institute of Mental Health. None of it. Nobody has talked to me yet. So today, I'm going to get some interviews lined up. That's my goal today. I want this thing to be fair and balanced, at least as fair and balanced as I can make it. Yeah, hi. My name is Phil Lawrence. I'm calling from Minnesota, and I am calling to see how I go about getting an interview with somebody from your organization. Well, hi, Jessica. My name's Phil Lawrence. I think I left you a voicemail not too long ago. I'm a guy doing a documentary, and I was looking for an interview. Oh, yeah, I'm holding for Susan. I am working on a film project, and I'm looking... yeah, hi, my name is Phil Lawrence. I'm calling from Minnesota, and... I'm good. I am calling to find out what I need to do to get an interview from somebody from the FDA. I'm working on a documentary project. I am calling to see what I need to do to get an interview with somebody from the FDA, specifically to talk about the process by which drugs are evaluated and approved. I am focusing mostly on antidepressants. Not one agency or organization would talk to me. Thanks for your time. I did, however, get reminded that what I was doing was dangerous. It wasn't my withdrawal from Paxil, but rather the fact that I was speaking out about the risks associated with antidepressants. By doing a documentary, I could be jeopardizing people's lives by scaring them away from getting the treatment they needed. I discovered that this is a scare tactic used again and again by the pharmaceutical companies and the groups they support.
By putting a host of very confounded data on a patient label about negative studies, that could potentially do more harm than good.
But if there were negative studies, isn't that the kind of information we should have? So today is day 5. Slept pretty good last night. I feel pretty good, except for today I've got when I woke up I heard like a electric sound in my head, and I couldn't figure out what it was at first. It's like just a really slight hiss, and I can hear it every once in a while. Sometimes it'll go in sequences of 3, like strange feeling. But this is day 5, so onward we go. I'm ready to slice another one.
I have to keep this in my locker.
What started as an uneasy feeling
All right, let's do it.
soon became a pounding headache that never went away. The intense pain combined with bizarre electrical pulses and a constant ringing in my ears was beginning to wear on me. Continuing to work and provide for my family became almost impossible. Somehow I pushed myself to do more interviews for the film, and on some days it felt like that was the only thing that kept me going.
Goes to those thought leaders.
On the recommendation of my doctor, I started therapy to deal with the changes I would be experiencing.
Okay, what I'm supposed to do is do an assessment, like I started last time with symptoms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah? It was tough to let my guard down and just talk about me, but it seemed to help. We talked a lot about the original source of my anxiety, and I began to realize how, as a kid, I had developed a set of rules to protect myself from what I thought caused the collapse of my parents' marriage. I feared conflict, and I avoided it at all cost, because in my mind, nothing good could come from it.
You used to have the most horrible nightmares when you were little. You would wake up in the middle of the night in the corner, standing in the corner, like up on your bed in the corner of the room, just screaming. And it would take me the longest time to get you back and settle down and up and awake.
Really?
And can't get you back. Yeah, I'll never forget that. It was scary.
Until now, I never told my mom I was taking an antidepressant. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because I didn't want her to worry about me. Or actually, maybe I didn't want her to be disappointed in me.
I really think you have a lot of courage, because I don't think this is something that anybody, not very many people would have the courage to even tell anybody. And with you, with the way you are and your shyness and the fact that you keep to yourself about things, this is huge. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so proud of you, and it's going to make me cry, so, yeah.
Don't cry, crazy
I'm just
old
proud of
baby.
you. Good for you.
All right. SSRI antidepressants have been around in the United States since 1987. That's when the FDA first approved Prozac. I wanted to find out as much about these drugs as I could. I thought it was important that I sit down face to face with people who may be able to give me some answers.
The original descriptions of depression, and a description is never invalid. It's not a scientific study, but the original descriptions of depression said it was a time-limited illness that went away in 6 months whether you did anything or not.
It's a standard of care to treat depression with an antidepressant. first before anything else is done. There's no diet and lifestyle modification or anything like that. I mean, you're just given the antidepressant because it's felt to be an actual standard of care.
There is a role for medication. Even someone with situational depression, if it's bad enough, I think it's good to support their mood for a while. But they could be on the medication for just a few months and have other things that are in place during that time, so it's not so hard to get off the medication. And then it's much easier for them to get on and get off. But if it goes much beyond 6 months to a year, it's going to be challenging. And unfortunately, we just have millions and millions of people right now in this country for whom that is the case.
These drugs can be useful, but they weren't actually made by God to treat people who are depressed or anxious. They were made within the pharmaceutical companies to act on the serotonin system.
They're powerful drugs, and when you do a study that says, does it treat or does it not treat depression, I don't know that you're really getting to the heart of the issue with these drugs. They're very powerful drugs.
They disrupt fundamental neurotransmitter systems that spread throughout the entire brain. The serotonin system goes to the frontal lobes, it goes to the cerebellum, goes to the temporal lobes, goes everywhere in the brain. To think that by disrupting that system you're doing some good for somebody is a bizarre, irrational concept. It's a poison.
The topic for today's advisory committee meeting is the possibility of a causal linkage between the emergence and/or intensification of suicidal thoughts and acts, suicidality that is, and/or other violent behaviors, and the use of antidepressant drugs.
I know with absolute certainty that if Charles had any idea of the side effects of Prozac, he would never have taken it. This drug is most assuredly responsible for any torment or suffering and the eventual suicide of my husband.
Unfortunately, with my dad, we didn't have time to notice too many changes, except that he became withdrawn and agitated. But by that time, it was too late. He got up at 9 o'clock in the morning, took a 12-inch butcher knife out of the kitchen drawer and stabbed himself violently in the abdomen once, and then proceeded to do it twice.
I had two sons, David Lee, age 8, Billy 16, the wife 20 years, all gone. I'll tell you why. After being on Prozac for 21 days, my wife shot and killed both of these two boys right here. She turned the gun to herself and shot herself twice. Now she's in jail for murder.
One by one, victims told their stories. But in the end, the decision was up to the FDA.
I do not find that there is credible evidence to support a conclusion that antidepressant drugs cause the emergence and/or the intensification of suicidality and/or other violent behaviors.
During the 1991 hearing, the FDA had to waive its own standards for conflicts of interest for 5 of the 9 members of the advisory panel because of their ties to the pharmaceutical industry.
Here's one of the problems with this whole story is that psychiatric drugs, particularly now, this whole expansion over the past 10, 15 years, that hasn't been done in an environment of science. It's been done in an environment of marketing. So if you look at how drugs are tested, approved by the FDA, and then sold and sort of pitched to the public, you'll see the influence of money at every step of the way.
Every single one of the studies, it's not done by universities. It's done by the drug companies. They design the study. They control all the variables. They decide who's going to be in the study. They write up the study. They submit it to the FDA.
To get a drug approved by the FDA, you have to have 2 positive studies. As the drug company, you can do 10 studies. 8 of the studies might be negative. And you give all that information to the FDA. As long as the FDA sees 2 of those studies are positive, your drug can get approved.
But what you will find in the FDA scientific database of antidepressant trials is that many of these drugs have many more negative studies than positive studies.
To me, it seemed like it was a much more fair, balanced educational process when I first started in the industry. Now, then in 1992, the Congress allowed the pharmaceutical industry to start to fund the new drug applications. When that started happening, all of a sudden, the FDA went away from being an adversarial component of our work to becoming a friendly component of our work. And it's all of a sudden, we have friends in the FDA. I never knew anybody liked anybody in the FDA, or I mean, because they had always talked about the FDA was kind of like what they used to hang over your head. They're hanging around the corner. They're in every hallway. If you say the wrong thing, you're going to get arrested.
Congress holds the purse strings, okay? The fact that they allowed the FDA to take funds from the pharmaceuticals back in the 90s, that opened the door to the fraud and the corruption.
As long as they're controlling the story, it's not going to be good science. I mean, you can see the inherent conflict of interest. They're not trying to test a drug really to see if it works in a neutral fashion, because they've already invested a lot of money. By the time they bring a drug to human clinical trials, their goal is to bring it to market. Okay, so they're using testing as a marketing device to get approval and to tell the story.
Last night sucked. I had dream after dream after dream. It was just crazy. I was afraid to go back to sleep one time because the dreams weren't like scary, but it was just so intense. And then once I woke up, I couldn't go back to sleep. And when I finally did, they kicked back in. Every day has become a struggle to cope with the changes going on in my head and my body. I can literally feel every moment in the battle for control between my brain and the drug.
Part of me, I won't and I don't, but, I just want to shake him and say, snap out of it, but he can't. And how long is this going to last?
Today's Saturday, and I feel like shit. Last night, for some reason my wife and we were just talking, and I just exploded in anger. I don't even know why.
One of the most common things are terrible shock-like feelings in the head during withdrawal. People can't even describe them. They sound crazy. Electricity, lightning, feelings they can't describe. Often disequilibrium, dizziness, an inability to turn your head without feeling weird or to stand up without feeling weird.
My head hurts. How you feeling?
Better than you.
I'm not happy. I gotta go. It's raining.
People just can't control their emotions. They go up and down. They get angry. They get irritable. Many of these things really shouldn't even be looked at as withdrawal problems.
You got that from Macy's?
What they basically are is their nerve and brain damage from the drug that becomes more manifest when the drug is stopped and they don't go away. That's the problem.
I want it to be over. I don't like anything about it. He walks around with his brows like this, and looks like he's angry all the time, and he's not happy, and I want him to be better, and he's always got a headache, and, he's got swishing and ears ringing and zaps, and he explains all this, and life goes on. And he's miserable.
are ringing. My ears are ringing, man. They won't stop ringing. And I feel like electrical pulses, and I don't even... I don't have any other thoughts. I'm just consumed by the ringing in my ears and the zaps that I'm feeling in my head.
He's got some emotions coming back. Except, I mean, he's emotional, I will say, more than he's been in a long time. But I think that his emotions are all over the board right now. I think he's used the word scared more than he has in 10 years. I mean, like, that he's scared.
Happy birthday to you.
Like we had my daughter's 10-year-old birthday party. They blew up some balloons, not with the helium, and they're popping them around, you know, playing with them. It scared him. And he didn't use the term that annoyed him or that it's bothering him. He was scared.
What happened in the 40s, just before this whole psychiatric drug revolution? We got antibiotics. Antibiotics truly were miracle pills. And we had vaccines. So science did produce these incredible breakthroughs in the first half of the 20th century, in the 1950s. And we got this belief in magic bullet medicine. Now you have drug companies come along, and they want to sell you pills. And the best way to sell those pills is as magic bullets, is to tie into that belief system that we have, that you can cure whatever ails you.
If we go prior to the 60s, no one would say, I feel so depressed. It was a very different way of thinking. But as a result of marketing, today we think in terms of depression, whereas we used to think in terms of nerves being shot. It's why the anti-anxiety drugs used to be the #1 drugs in America. Today, they're not. Today, we talk about depression, and so antidepressants are the #1 drugs in America.
Before a pharmaceutical company can market a new psychiatric drug, the FDA must approve it based on clinical trials that show that the drug can safely and effectively treat a specific mental disorder. To determine what is considered a mental disorder, the FDA refers to a handbook created by the American Psychiatric Association called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The DSM was first published in 1952. At that time, the DSM contained about 100 descriptions of disorders. The most recent version contains almost 400 mental disorders.
They have a zillion disorders. And you notice they call them disorders. They can't call them diseases because they're not diseases. They're not abnormalities of the brain. And all in the DSM, all the criteria are subjective opinions of someone's behavior. When the psychiatric community gets together and they vote on the DSM, they vote on these things. They don't have data that supports that there's actually an abnormality in your brain. They're going, oh yeah, that behavior, what do y'all think? Do you think that's bipolar? And they raise their hand and literally vote on these things.
People have said that depression is the springboard. And once you have it approved for depression by the FDA, you can then use it for lots of other things that verge on depression.
Panic disorder did not exist as a diagnosis. Then Upjohn wanted to find a special niche for its drug Xanax. So Upjohn created the concept of panic disorder, got it into the DSM, and then became the first drug company to test a drug, Xanax, for panic disorder.
Clearly what they're doing is they're pathologizing everyday life. So they're pathologizing sort of whatever makes you uncomfortable or whatever behavior other people don't like.
The committees that do the two key disorders, mood disorders and schizophrenic and psychotic disorders, two of the key, every single committee member has a tie to the drug companies.
As the day approaches where I may actually stop taking Paxil, I find myself doubting more and more if I can handle it. I know it's an important milestone, but I also know that when I stop taking the drug completely, it's going to get tough. I feel so helpless and afraid. And what if I really do have a chemical imbalance? I guess I could turn back. I could go back to the life I had on Paxil. It wasn't great, but at least I was functioning.
I just want it to be over. But I'm totally understanding, and it takes time. I mean, he was on it for 10 years. How can it go away in 6 weeks, 1 month? I mean, I know it takes time. It could take a year. And we'll get through it.
In 1966, George Ashcroft in The Lancet published an article in which he speculated that those with depression had too little serotonin. And that led to the pharmaceuticals beginning research in that area. What's funny is that by 1970, George Ashcroft had discredited his own theory. His own research proved that he was wrong about that. And of course, we know from autopsies that people with a history of depression do not have more or less serotonin. There's no pattern there.
While scientists have never proven this, the marketing companies took this. This opened up a whole new era of marketing for them. Along comes this chemical theory, and now they can say, we are treating a biological disease.
The whole conception of it is mistaken. It makes it sound like there's some steady state level for serotonin for all people to have, like a body temperature, and that we should all have some sort of steady state level. These things go up and down all the time, levels. Serotonin, dopamine, they go up and down all day long. It's an incredibly complex thing. The point is, when you went in to get this drug, did your system in some way operate in a pathological manner? The answer is undoubtedly no.
It just paints it as too neat a little picture to say it's a chemical imbalance. And that's really what I think most critics have a problem with, is that in the issue of informed consent, people should be given all the facts. And to say it's just a simple chemical imbalance is not reality.
Do people with mental disorders have known chemical imbalances? No. After they take the drugs, will they? Yes. They will have abnormally operating systems. And you can go to a paper by Steve Hyman, Paradigm for Understanding Psychotropic Drug Action. Remember, Steve Hyman is the former director of the NIMH. He's a neuroscientist, and he explains all this. And he says, once you're on a psychotropic drug, you end up with a brain that is, quote, operating in a manner that is both qualitatively and quantitatively different than normal. Okay? It's not a balancing act, it's an imbalancing act.
He doesn't make me waters anymore at night. He doesn't kiss me before he eats. He doesn't even say goodnight before he goes to bed. He doesn't kiss me before he goes to bed. We did these things for years, upon years upon years. So I just really hope that he's not coming off of this and being like, well, who's that lady? Why am I with her? Because I just don't feel any love a lot of times. But we'll see.
When I started taking Paxil in 1996, no one said a word to me about withdrawal. Now I know why. In an internal memo dated May 1st, 1997, GlaxoSmithKline addressed concerns of withdrawal with its Paxil selling team. They instructed their sales representatives that instead of withdrawal syndrome, which implies addictive properties, try to refer to this phenomenon as discontinuation symptoms. A GSK business plan guide from December of that same year instructed sales representatives to minimize concerns surrounding discontinuation symptoms and told them to explain to doctors that the discontinuation incident rate is 2 in 1,000 patients. Yet another step in GSK damage control was to distribute patient education pamphlets to doctors' offices that asked the question, is Paxil addictive? The pamphlet clearly stated, Paxil has been studied in both short and long-term use and is not associated with dependence or addiction. Why go to such great lengths to hide problems with Paxil withdrawal? The company made that clear when they put out this message to their sales force.
Can you stop it when you want to stop it, yes or no? If you can't stop it when you want to stop it, it's an addicting drug. The drug company has countered by saying, well, we don't see people craving it. We don't see a black market and addicts on the street begging for it. And my response to that is, you would if the doctors didn't dispense it so freely. I've seen patients where if they skip a day of their drug, they're desperate to get it. Is that craving? Is that addiction?
In addition to the risk of dependence, the FDA has recently warned that they now know that there is an increased risk of suicidal thinking and actions when starting an antidepressant, changing the dose, or when trying to stop taking these drugs.
There's no doubt whatsoever withdrawal from drugs, especially Paxil, can cause people to get suicidal and violent. I've had a number of cases where people have killed themselves or committed violence within a few days after stopping Paxil or similar drugs.
So today's the day that I officially stopped taking Paxil after 10 years. It's really hard because I feel like the past month that I've been a complete asshole to my family. I have an incredibly short temper, and I'm sure my kids think their dad's crazy because I have, like, no patience. My wife has been pretty understanding, but it's hard. I mean, it starts okay. You know, it's kind of like, we're going to do this project. I'm going to get off of Paxil. And it's kind of exciting, and everything's new. But after a month of temper tantrums, moods, and the headaches and the ringing in the ears, and I can't help around the house as much. And, you know, the kids are busy and they have homework, and I can't help them with that because I get so irritated. Now, today, I'm stopping it, and I'm really scared that it's going to get worse. It's not depression in terms of whatever you think, you know, you feel low. This is worse by 100 times because something in my head is messing with me. And it won't let go. So why would I want to move on to something that's going to make it worse? I mean, I want it out. I really want it out of me so bad. But I'm so scared. I'm so scared that something bad's going to happen. I don't know why I took this shit in the first place. I wish I never did. If I would have known 10 years ago that because I went to meetings and turned red, or felt embarrassed or scared, that I'd be sitting here right now at 42 years old crying because I'm scared. There's no way I ever would have taken it. No way.
I was responsible for my decision to take an antidepressant, and now I have to live with that. But what about those who don't get a choice? What will happen to them?
What are you doing, bud?
Video TV.
You doing some... What are you doing?
Video TV.
You like it? Huh?
Uh-huh.
Is it heavy?
Yep.
We live in a society now where the most prevalent form of child abuse is giving them psychiatric drugs. We don't beat our kids so much anymore. We give them psychiatric drugs. We ruin their brains for our convenience. It is a tragic situation.
In this country today, we have about 22,000 kids under 5 right now on antidepressants. We have 2.5 million children 18 and under on antidepressants. For example, you have a kid who's just a problem. He's not been raised properly. He's not disciplined. And we say he's just a brat. Well, today he's not a brat. He gets diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. And he gets a drug.
Children are essentially involuntary patients. You have kids, you know, when your kid is sick. I mean, I have an 8-year-old. When my son is sick and he has to take an antibiotic, I make him take it, whether he wants to or not. And that's true for most medications that are prescribed for children. Their parents make them take it, so they're involuntary. So we have to be extra cautious.
And you can go back in the early 90s, the drug companies were holding meetings and they were saying, how can we expand our markets to children? And they have done it very successfully.
Congress did pass a law that would allow drug companies to extend the patent of their drugs if they did studies with kids.
The pharmaceutical companies wasted little time. The studies were done and the FDA approval soon followed. It was a win-win for the drug companies. Their patents were extended and a new market was born. But over time, the growing number of incidents of bizarre behavior, homicides, and suicides prompted experts to look closer at the studies.
What's really heartbreaking and really inexcusable is evidence that the drug companies suppressed data about children because they were concerned that it would affect the sales of their drug in adults.
In 2003, the British Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the equivalent to the American FDA, virtually banned SSRI antidepressants for children. Turns out they had uncovered information in pharmaceutical company studies that indicated that antidepressants were no more effective in children than placebo, and that they can make children agitated, sleepless, hostile, aggressive, and suicidal. These studies showed that children taking antidepressants were as much as 6 times more likely to become violent or suicidal.
We found a disturbing number of recent school shooters were either on medication or were experiencing withdrawal.
It was violent behavior Ryan had never before exhibited before going on Paxil.
That Kazmierczak had stopped taking an antidepressant about 3 weeks ago because he made him feel like a zombie.
Despite the warnings, more than 9 million American children continue to take prescribed psychiatric drugs, including antidepressants.
You know, it sucks at my house. Pale and I are fighting all the time. The most fucked up thing I'd ever dreamed today was there was another person right here, and it was me. It was cutting me. And it wasn't like any other dream, because it was like, it was like real, you know. But
I wasn't dreaming about somebody else or something around me. I was dreaming that I was another person right in front of me, and that person was cutting me.
As the days slowly passed, the feelings of confusion and despair seemed to get worse. I struggled every day to understand if this was my social anxiety returning or if it was the lingering effects of Paxil withdrawal. So much was going on in my head, I really just wanted to get back to the life that I knew before. But when I tried, it wasn't there. Soon I even stopped going to therapy. I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but it turned out that my insurance company wasn't going to cover any of the cost, so the bills were piling up. I decided to try other things like basic lifestyle changes.
So how much Paxil have you been taking in the past?
20 milligrams every day for 10 years.
Okay.
I tried changing my diet. The theory is that you can increase the production of serotonin in your body by the foods that you eat.
I think a lot of people are put on antidepressants that if they looked at their nutrition first, they wouldn't need them.
I tried it for a while and I did feel better about what I was putting in my body, but unfortunately it didn't help much with my withdrawal symptoms. I read a lot about the benefits of exercise, and my neighbor teaches Pilates, so I gave her a call. Whatever you think about Pilates, one thing is for sure, it's not easy. But again, because of the pain in my head, the nausea, and my messed up balance, it was almost impossible for me to stay with the routine. So I decided to explore some alternatives. I'd always been pretty skeptical about acupuncture. I have to say that after I left the first session, I actually felt strangely energized. But unfortunately, the rush didn't last too long. Acupuncture requires a number of visits before you really see results. And the reality is, none of it is covered by my insurance company. Day after day, I seemed to continue to fall deeper in despair.
Huh? I love you, bud.
You too, Daddy.
Good boy.
I'm not sure if it's the effects of Paxil or if this is just the way I am.
That's pretty good.
More and more the thoughts of ending the pain rushed through my head. Not necessarily wanting to do it, but thinking about how I would do it.
Let's find the mouse and then let's come back and read.
It feels like my entire mind, body, and spirit is being crushed by an enormous weight. It's nothing specific, it's just an intense negative force. I'm so confused. I feel like I'm running out of options.
You're making the hair stand up in the back of my neck. I mean, you're talking to somebody who has provided expert testimony in a series of things where people have killed themselves or tried to kill themselves or assaulted people after trying to stop these drugs or sometimes shortly after starting it. So I gotta warn you, make plans. Make careful plans. I worry about you being alone somewhere, someplace, and doing something really dumb. I mean, you have the insight now. Will you have the insight if things get worse?
20-year-old Taylor was trying to stop taking the antidepressant Effexor. He wrote the words, "I feel so uneasy, strange, like I'm not me," just before he went to the roof of the family's 14-story building and jumped to his death. Milton and Amby Cole had just built a new home with the help of their son. After working on the house, Milton was having chest pains. His doctor gave him a prescription along with free samples of Prozac. 13 days later, Amby found her husband of 47 years hanging from a beam in the back room of their shop. In 2004, 19-year-old college student Tracy Johnson needed extra money, so she decided to participate in a clinical trial for the new antidepressant, Cymbalta. Tracy's body was found hanging by a scarf from a shower rod in a laboratory run by the drug company Eli Lilly. The list goes on and on.
I feel very, very disturbed by the fact that so many Americans today are taking these drugs, and it seems to me that the FDA and the psychiatric community are doing everything in their power to keep it going. I mean, to not stop the abuse that's going on.
But the regulatory function is really a sort of, and it becomes increasingly more obvious, it is really an adjunct of the pharmaceutical business.
It's the honesty thing. The pharmaceuticals and the psychiatric community are not being honest with people about these drugs and about the adverse reactions. If they were, I wouldn't care. But they're not being honest.
I should have been able to look at the inner documents from GlaxoSmithKline right from day number one. When they said they have a drug that's safe, I don't want to just take the word of some bimbo cheerleader from their company who's sent to tell me that their drug is safe. I want to see every last number that they have.
If you contract with any human subject to collect any data, you ought not to be able to say, this is proprietary information, other people can't have access to it. And to that, I would say bullshit. If you contract with humans to do your research, you have an obligation to all other humans to make those data available.
It seems to me patients needs almost some kind of a contract with their, with their clinicians. Please don't ever prescribe me a drug unless it is really essential.
Today, doctors, they don't really control their own practice to a great extent. The insurance companies say we'll pay this amount, and consequently they have to move lots of patients through that office quickly. You cannot take a lot of time with the patient.
To control cost, family doctors are often pressured by HMOs and insurance companies to prescribe antidepressants rather than refer patients to specialists. Approximately 70% of all the prescriptions for antidepressants are written by family doctors.
The doctor-patient relationship is one of the most sacred relationships beyond that of the marriage relationships between partners. And the doctor-patient relationship, if you read The Cancer Ward by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he was arguably one of the great freedom fighters and liberators of the old Soviet bloc, he said, metaphorically in that book, and de facto at other times, he said, when the government co-opts the relationship between the doctor and the patient, the soul of the country is gone.
Pharmaceutical companies continue to fill their pipelines with new drugs, but why wouldn't they? After all, they are businesses, and regardless of what they say, their loyalties are to their bottom line and to their stockholders, not to you and me. They make billions of dollars selling drugs to a society that keeps coming back for more. I'm starting to think that antidepressants are like the perfect storm. Everything came together to create the ultimate moneymaker. They had the perfect consumer. They had the perfect illness. They used the lure of money and power to persuade the psychiatric community to define an array of illnesses that cannot be scientifically proven and that are subjectively diagnosed. They had the perfect marketing scheme, a free pass from the FDA to produce huge advertising campaigns in magazines and on television that played directly to the consumer's fears and desires to get better. And then they had the perfect pushers, the FDA and a medical community that has become accustomed to the perks and persuasions of the pharmaceutical sales force.
I can't do it anymore. I can't keep
doing this. It's killing me. It's hurt my family. My kids don't deserve it. So, I just want to say to you guys, I love you very much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't do it. I can't. I'm so confused. Am I crazy? Is it my head? What's going on? I'm going to have to admit to myself that this is who I am. This is what I'll be, and medication might have to be a part of my life.